morning, dreamers. Good morning, dreamers. Hope you're the kind who dreams with your eyes open. Right now, it doesn't look really like that. Welcome to TheAugustFest 2015 once again. And I'm Sneha, and I'll be walking you through events rest of the day today and tomorrow. I'm hoping you're all tweeting away with the hashtag TheAugustFest, because if you're not, then you're not going to get funded here. Just kidding. The next speaker we have on stage has been named as one of the most powerful women in Indian business by Fortune India. I'm sure you all know whom I'm talking about. Vani Kola is a pioneer in India's venture capital industry. Her passion for supporting entrepreneurs drew her from Silicon Valley to Bangalore in 2006, at a time when many were still skeptical about the potential of Indian entrepreneurs to create global firms. Since then, she has been involved in enabling funding in more than 35 companies, including Snapdeal, Myntra, Urban Ladder, Zivame, and Bluestone. Vani has the risk capacity to identify visionary ideas at an early stage and is deeply committed to the success of entrepreneurs in Kalari Capital's portfolio, as well as the larger entrepreneurial ecosystem that is meeting the new needs of a newly vibrant Indian entrepreneur community. And well, if you thought she was just an awesome entrepreneur and a venture capitalist, there is more. You must know that she also climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and has completed multiple marathons. So ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and eyes and ears together for Vani Kola.
Good morning, everyone. When Kiran asked me to come back to Hyderabad, this is home. I grew up here for the first 20 years of my life and do this event. Little did I know how much energy I was going to experience today and the enthusiasm in Hyderabad, because I haven't really connected back into the startup scene here for a long, long time. Something that, thanks to Kiran and TheAugustFest, I hope to be back here more often, and thanks to the Telangana government T-Hub initiative, which, by the way, I have to mention, sir, is really absolutely wonderful that the government takes this kind of initiative, unusual for governments anywhere in the world, to be inspiring and innovative as this government is trying to do. So I absolutely expect to come back here and spend more time with many of you here and share some of your entrepreneurial journey and passion to create something new. I know how you must feel when you go to a VC office to see whether your presentation will work, demo will work. We haven't tested it, so I don't know if it's going to work, so I'm going to try it. Bear with me. Okay, it does work. Okay, great. So the city of Hyderabad of yesteryears has always been known as the city of the Nawabs. And I think we have different kind of Nawabs also that we have created now. And the amount of contribution Hyderabad has made on many, many different segments, but especially in the startup world, and some fantastic leaders that have emerged in the whole world across the whole world, is something we can take great pride in. And I think that's a good start for each of us to begin our entrepreneurial journeys. And I feel especially proud to be in this group here today. Like I said, since Hyderabad is where I grew up, and this was home for many, many years. What I want to do today is to share sort of two phases of my journey, and a lot of that has to do with perhaps not dissimilar choices, dilemmas, hurdles that each of you go through in your own lives. The first phase was my journey as an entrepreneur. The second phase of my journey as a venture capitalist. I want to take a few things from those learnings, share that with you, and hopefully one or two of those are applicable to what you are facing today and might take away as you build your businesses. Entrepreneurial journey, I have so many people ask so often, when is the right time to do it? How to go about doing it? By quitting a job, not quitting a job, having enough savings in a bank, when should you do it? And I think entrepreneurship is one of those things, the best I can tell is you are never really ready for it. There is never really a perfect timing. You have to do it when you feel the passion and the call to go create something. And it's a dive. You don't really know how it's going to turn out. And it's that aspect of unknown that you're willing to face that becomes the most important characteristic in your perseverance to be able to reach that end goal. And entrepreneurs, interestingly, look at risk slightly differently. We all know what the conventional path is that I, as a parent, would like to see my children or our parents would have expected from us. But entrepreneurship kind of puts you on a different path. It's one that you're willing to walk through the journey that is unknown, the journey that we don't know where it'll end. But unless you're willing to step on that unpaved path and take the risks that come with that, you can't even begin to put your idea into motion to build an institution. At the end of the day, the joy of entrepreneurship is taking something that is unproven, perhaps thousands of people don't believe it is possible, your conviction that it is possible, that you take that and make it happen. And that is the joy of being an entrepreneur. But for that, we have to do something that is not innate in our human nature. We all like to stay in our comfort zone. There is nothing wrong with that. That's sort of how we are built. That's probably how we have survived as a species. But being able to step outside of your comfort zone is the only way you can kind of experience the magic. And in my life, what I've done is every 10 years or so, I try to make a big leap. Big leaps are not that easy because you really have to step outside and restart. And restart a first time, a second time, a third time doesn't get any easier. If you were an entrepreneur before and you want to restart a new company, it is the same process. Of course, I look at that as you have your first child, your second child, it's the same process. It doesn't get any easier. It's the same pain, it's the same joy, it's the same experiences. So I think, but being able to make big leaps from your comfort zone is very, very important. In my case, being able to just quit a job with a 18-month-old and be willing to sign up to give up all my savings to put into an idea with no background of ever having any business experience. And I grew up in Hyderabad. My father was a state government employee, a middle-class family. And anybody who grew up in the 70s, 80s, India was very different then. You were conditioned, schooled to follow a conventional path. And the moment you wanted to step out of that conventional path, when I started my company and called my father very proudly, there was a dead silence. And I was wondering what I said that was wrong. And he said, "You want to start a business? We are not those kind of people." That was his take on what entrepreneurship meant. But, that was a different era. But I think the important step is being able to step out of something where the unknowns are so large, but you are willing to bet on yourself. You're kind of the jockey betting on the horse that you are riding today. So for me, that was in the 1996, starting a company and with an engineering background and no business background, not knowing any venture capitalists, which maybe some of you here sitting also face, and not knowing how to raise funding, but believing that I could do it. And don't underestimate the power of that belief. I think that's very, very important tool that every entrepreneur has. And likewise, then coming back to India after 22 years of being away, which I'll talk a little bit more about, while you may make these big leaps, but every day, though, you have to be doing something that's outside of your critical zone. It could be that standing in front of many people and speaking, which may or may not be in your comfort zone, or whatever else. But every day, whether it's a small thing or a big thing, do things that are outside your comfort zone. And I think that's very, very important to keep us innovating, keep us pushing our inner walls to what we are each capable of. Okay? So I want to spend a little time on the journey back to India. And after 22 years of being in US, most of it in the Bay Area, we decided to pack the bags in a very, very short time and come back to India because I was deeply convinced in 2006, although it sounds like perfect timing today, it was impossible in 2006 to find too many people who believed that there would be enough tech companies, enough entrepreneurs who will dream big, and we could build businesses and, most importantly, also return huge returns to global investors. Today, whether you know the facets of how this works or not, much of the venture capital investing comes from pools of capital that are brought into India from global investors. Why should you care? Because their dollar they can put anywhere in the world, and we have to, from India, provide the same kind of return. Why same kind? Better return, an alpha return, saying that India is capable of attracting this global investment pool and attracting this talent to come and want to invest in India into an Indian entrepreneur. So the oxymoron was venture capital was unknown in India. Finding those kind of entrepreneurs, there were questions, will Indian entrepreneurs really build large-scale businesses? And will Indian government facilitate ability for us to return back the capital to these global investors? And all of those, I couldn't be more happy, a decade later, have been proven that we can do that. Plenty of companies that make it into the global unicorn or decacorn lists, and global investors in the venture world have actually made very handsome returns. So I'm very, very proud that this journey over the last 10 years has proven correct to have taken that initial step. But how do you pick these entrepreneurs? All ideas look the same, honestly. After you sit through a day and listen to 10 entrepreneurs, or we sit through 2 days here and listen to and meet hundreds of entrepreneurs, how do you stand out? Ideas, in any given interesting space, there are always people with the same idea, whether you say e-commerce, vertical commerce, mobile apps, budget hotels, hyper-local, gaming. One after another, the ideas more or less seem the same. Of course, there is a value to an idea, but within that idea, it is your critical insight to your consumer and how you can really be the one to go viral, how you can be the one that's going to have this network, how you're going to out-execute everybody else to get to the top. That's where whatever metaphor you want to use, you be the purple cow that stands out in a field of everybody looking the same. And that's really one of the most difficult things. I get many, many emails, and most of the time, people have not thought through to use that opportunity to stand out and say one or two things, why their idea, they are special. And you will be among thousands of people trying to get funding. And most of the time, the global norms, and in India, it hasn't been any different, is about 2 to 3% of the companies that venture capitalists see get funding. So 2 to 3%, that's less than the pick rate of an Ivy League college. So you need to be able to then stand out on how you are that 2 to 3%. A lot of that is around stargazing, it's around connecting the dots to what do you think is the vision of the future? How are you going to disrupt the future? How is your idea the most disruptive today? And then you have to quickly back that up with why is it that you have thought through the execution on why you can win. I know it's very cool today for companies to come and say, I don't care about a revenue model, and I absolutely don't know what profitability is. I can tell you that most of the time, that is not a very attractive pitch. If you are not even aware of what the unit economics of your business model is and are unwilling to even consider what you think the unit economics could be, sure, of course, you don't have to have revenue from day one. That's not the expectation. But an understanding of what is the path to start generating some interesting revenue and what is the path to get to profitability at some point, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. But if you're not, don't display a DNA of thinking about that. I think it's really not that easy to get noticed and bubble up to the top. So another topic which I get commonly is I don't want to lose control. I don't want to dilute too much. The interesting thing is there are two kinds of businesses, and in your mind, in your heart, you have to reconcile which one you want to be. It's not a question of which path is better. There's no such thing. All paths are good. If it's good for you, it's good for you. That's all. There is a difference between building a lifestyle business where maybe you have some angel investors, friends and family. There's a difference between building a venture capital backed business. Venture capital backed businesses are about building a scale very, very, very rapidly. Just to give an example, somebody like Snapdeal, not too long ago, in 2009, when I first met them, two 26-year-olds doing about 20 lakhs in total revenue to date at that time, to today somewhere approximately doing close to $4 billion in gross sales. That's in a matter of 5 years. That's a steep ramp and a steep growth for any company anywhere in the world. Those are the companies that are best suited for a venture model. Obviously, almost 50-60% of the companies, after they receive venture capital funding, still do not succeed, still don't get up there in the category of being a home run. That's okay, but at least you have tried. But in order to raise venture capital, you have to be willing to look at markets that are maybe not yet proven markets, but maybe it's latent demand, but nonetheless, markets that are very, very large opportunity markets and that you want to really monopolize. You have to have a DNA that says, I want to go monopolize those markets. If that is not your aspiration, that is not your DNA, then venture capital is a very, very painful process for you and the investor, because once you've partnered, there is really no way to untangle. There is no divorce in a venture capital. So you're stuck together and you're stuck for a long time. So for this model to work, you really have to be able to go build large businesses. When you have to go build large businesses, control is really not in the conventional sense. In India, we have seen India Inc., which is only in India we have this word promoter. Anywhere else in the world, there's no concept of a promoter. You are the entrepreneur, you are the management team, you are building this future. There is no concept of a promoter and a hired manager. We invest in CEOs for whom this process of building the company is all about their life today, 24/7. And so in that process of building high growth companies and raising hundreds of millions of dollars, you will dilute. Whether you take a Elon Musk at Tesla or a Larry Page at Google or a Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook or whatever, by the time you start from an idea and you need funding to get to an IPO, you will be in single-digit ownership. And you have to make peace and reconcile to that. And that is something unnecessarily seems to cause a lot of angst among entrepreneurs most often, especially in India more so. I don't think this is true elsewhere. But here, we still haven't reconciled to what the dynamics, good and bad, of venture capital models are. And why I want to share this is, in the last decade, if you think about some of the companies that we will all recognize today, nobody knew that these markets existed, right? Who would have thought renting rooms in your house, and just only 7 years back, who would have thought that would be a $25 billion market, Airbnb, or Uber at a 50 billion valuation, or any of the many names that we can take. They were not names that were known in the last 10 years. They were not brands that existed. More importantly, they were not business concepts that existed. So you have to be willing to embrace the uncertainty and be a bit crazy and think some crazy things. And time and again, every idea that seems familiar today started with someone who was sort of a left thinker who thought completely outside the box. And I think that is what this chart is all about. So don't think Me Too. Me Too companies are very difficult to get funded, very difficult to execute. The friction of building a Me Too company is too high. You have to think creative, you have to think out of the box, maybe succeed, hopefully, but if you fail, think again, restart again. And one of the other things that's very limited understood is, even though you may get venture capital funding, there is actually a research that a friend of mine, John Mullins, who teaches at London School of Business, and he has a book on this, wrote is, the most successful companies that if you see, their first idea didn't work. So your ability to be agile, your ability to pivot becomes a very important goal. Our own sort of great names in India, great companies in the last 4 or 5 years that have come up. Snapdeal, as many of you know, started out as a couponing site, but they saw such tremendous traffic for products that they didn't even have. They said, well, you know, we have traffic, let's go sell these products, let's see what we can do. And their pivot to become from a couponing business to a product business, you know, today they wouldn't be where they are if they weren't willing to cannibalize their original idea. And that's another problem. We get stuck in our vision and our idea. Now, there is a balance between believing in it and perceiving it, which also is an important quality. But within that, knowing when to read the market signals and being able to pivot. And Myntra, likewise, was about personalized gifts. And both companies, couponing and personalized gifts, as I was walking through the corridors, I saw a couple of companies that were doing exactly the same business ideas that were there a couple of years back. And maybe their time is here now. But those ideas at that time just could not get scale and momentum. And one of the smartest pivots Mukesh did at Myntra was to do lifestyle. And it was interesting because we said, you know, who's going to buy these expensive branded products that are not even known in India today, many of these brands. And, you know, he firmly believed there was a market for it and obviously executed to excellence with that. And, you know, just to take a minute and tell who we are, Kalari is a early stage investment firm, which means we typically like to be the first Series A institutional investor. We have 650 million under management today. We have invested in over 60 companies. We primarily invest in tech companies. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's all we know. And so many times, many of the business plans we get, we are simply not qualified or competent to be able to look at them. And you know, if you're doing a hotel or you're building a school or building a hospital, all worthy things, and there's tremendous opportunity in India for it, but we are not the right venture capitalists for you. So I would highly encourage, before you approach any investor, us or anyone else, to at least, I mean, in these days, Google, check what they do, and see if they are a fit for you and which partner is a fit for you. Different partners have different interests, and, you know, go at least help yourself to reach through the right filters if you're reaching out and cold calling. And by the way, I mean, somebody like Snapdeal had no introduction into us, but they simply cold called and emailed and persisted till we gave them a meeting. And I think we gave them a term sheet actually within 1 week of meeting them. So now that's an exception. That is not the norm. So I wouldn't say that many companies get funded that way, but exceptions happen, and you can be that exception. And India, you know, obviously these are not all our invested companies, and I'm not the investor in each of these companies, but we can take collective pride in it. In just the last decade, we have created many unicorns, and I think that's something we should be really proud of, because a decade ago, in a room like this, if we asked people to put their hand up and said, what is the possibility we can build billion-dollar companies in India, I think, you know, only the crazy would have put up their hands. But today we have proof, and that's you know, something that we should all collectively take pride. And I actually believe with all the odds that we had over the last decade, if I think to the next decade, it'll be 4 or 5 times this number of companies that can reach that scale and build global brands. So I think entrepreneurship is about believing that everything is possible. You have to believe that what you're doing is possible, first and foremost. And without that conviction, without that courage, it's a very hard road. It's a lonely road. You don't know if it's going to succeed or not. It'll be many years before you know that, but it's the joy of the journey. It's the inability to do anything other than think your idea, think your, with a single purpose, why you should pursue this path. But one thing I'm very, very certain, you, the entrepreneurs, will shape our economy, will shape the wealth rebalancing, which is difficult and hasn't really happened in the corporate India of the Esther years. And today we see companies like Flipkart, companies like Snapdeal, companies like InMobi, companies like Mu Sigma, and out of those companies are coming people who are the next generation entrepreneurs who have the financial wealth that has come from being part of a journey of a company whose dreams that they were willing to take risk in. And I was 2 days back in IIT Bombay for a ESL event, and it's unbelievable when you ask these kids to put their hand up and say, how many of you want to be in startups versus work in large corporates? 90% of the people really want to dream and be an entrepreneur, and that energy which TheAugustFest is trying to harness, and the accelerators, the innovators, the incubators are all trying to unleash, is where I believe we will be able to leapfrog as a country any problem. I shared this story with Bhavesh at Ola. I told him that I'm very, very proud of what you have done, because while I have 3 cars, 2 drivers, my parents really mostly, when they need to go out, say, no, I don't need your car, I ordered Ola. It is giving, and my father is 82 years old, and that's giving that dignity and mobility and independence, what his business has done for many, many people. And so it's the entrepreneur's innovation that can solve many of the problems that we have, infrastructural, be they be power, whatever. There are several things to solve in India, and I think collectively your ideas, your innovation is what is going to make that happen. And I'm very proud that I was able to come back to India and be part of that journey. It's a privilege to work with entrepreneurs and be part of that journey in converting their ideas into great institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll take some Q&A.
The 95% or 90% of the company in startup world who have succeeded and got huge funding are a primary model of B2C. And few companies in B2B model like Zoho or Freshdesk are successful. But whenever I've seen, though I invest a little bit in angel investor, there is a huge dearth of B2B model or enterprise business. And you talk to any, fresh guy from IITs and all, everyone wants to chase the dream of B2C, and no one is interested in an enterprise business, primarily because getting funding in the enterprise business is very, very tough. So is the VC world is going to look at a very different perspective? You have only few examples like Freshdesk and Zoho. What at the VC world, or what the people who are going to start the company get encouraged from for an enterprise B2B business?
See, enterprise B2B in India is tough, because if you look at IT budget of an Indian enterprise, it's very, very small compared to global IT budgets. I mean, IT budget in any enterprise in India is like 1 or 2%, and that in global companies is 10, 15%. So the problem is, if you do enterprise B2B, to show India as a captive market and a large market opportunity is very difficult. If you say, I'm going to do enterprise globally, then whether that company can be situated in India because your market, your customer is elsewhere, and you could say India is great about cost of doing business, but not really, because it's about the sales and marketing cost, and the sales and marketing cost for you will be the same as anywhere else. Actually, yours may be higher because you're trying to sit here in India and manage sales guys somewhere else in the world. So the risks of that business is very, very high. Now, if you say B2B from an SME perspective, those have received quite a bit of funding. But you're right, bulk of the funding is in B2C, because that's really where the spend is. If you track where the spend is, the consumer and the consumer spend over the last 2 decades, and especially over the last decade, has grown unbelievably. For example, at Snapdeal, for us, the number 5 revenue center is Manipur. And you go, what? And it's not Bombay, it's not Hyderabad, because it's a question of demand supply inequity that exists in the Northeast, but they can order on the internet and we can deliver. So, the latent consumer demand, second tier, third tier cities, not just the metro. Metro is a very small part of the whole, internet revolution that is going on. If we talk about inclusive citizenship, where every citizen in India for the same rupee can buy the same thing as their counterparts, then there is only way you can do that is internet and mobile. I use both synonymously because they are grade lines today. But on a B2B, yes, there is an SME movement, and I think those have gotten quite a bit of funding. But at the large enterprise level, there is just no market in India, or not sufficient market. So once in a while, you'll see a company get funded, iFlex or this or that or whatever, and they succeed, and that's fine. And I see Sanjay here, and Zip Dial that they funded, which was successful, was, I would call it a B2B, but B2B not from the enterprise level, but maybe he can share more details about that. So it's not that, B2B companies are not funded, but you're absolutely right. The path to get that funding will be slightly harder. In our firm, I think 70% of our investments are B2C, 30% are B2B. So it's not zero, but it's not going to be 50-50 anytime soon that I see of. Simply market dynamics. What is the market for your B2B solution? But you could be a fresh desk kind of a company and still get funding, but their market is outside of India, and that's a whole different story.
Thanks for the key insights into your VC's mind, ma'am. I'm Suresh from B2C Chair. I was wondering if entrepreneurs from competing business, let's say that set of entrepreneurs who are starting a business which is competing to your portfolio that you already have, and if they approach you for investments, what is the take of that of any investors, especially VCs?
Usually we don't like to be involved in competing businesses because, entrepreneurs worry about conflict of interest. At the end of the day, our reputation means a lot to us, and we don't want our entrepreneurs to be uncomfortable. We sit on the board. We have access to a lot of information. We never invest when we don't have a board seat. We are very active in how we engage and help companies. So if you believe that you are 100% dead on competition, then you really shouldn't reach out to us for investment. You may reach out because you want an introduction to one of our companies, and we are happy to facilitate that. But businesses usually don't compete head-on like that. Entrepreneurs think that it does, but the first question you have to ask yourself is, if you are competing with one of our companies head-on, and they have received a lot of funding, not that funding is the important litmus test of a company's potential to succeed, but access to capital is one of those factors that is important. So you should ask yourself, why am I building a Me Too company? But setting aside that question, perhaps there are differences in your business. For example, today we are, by virtue of Myntra, shareholders both in Flipkart and Snapdeal, but they are actually two very different businesses from the back end, even though from a consumer perspective, it may not quite appear that way. And so I would say that most businesses don't really compete that head-on, but we leave it to the entrepreneur. If they believe they have a conflicting company, we would prefer not to even look at their business plan.
Hello. Madam, I want to understand how do you advise startup companies on the subject of valuations? What are valuations, and what are the valuation irrationalities that are existing in the market today? How does a venture capital view it? And secondly, if it is venture capital, for long it has been about finances. Today, I think to succeed as a startup, we need talent capital. We need to have a shared amount of risk appetite as well as strategy capital. How do you think venture capital as an investment or as a force evolve over a period of time to propagate interesting ideas in startups?
I understood your first question, which is how do we decide valuations, but I don't think I got your second question.
Yeah, for long, startups have benefited from venture capital from a finance standpoint. Today, for a startup to succeed, there are a lot of other elements also which form as a capital. For instance, talent capital is an integral part. Will venture agencies offer talent capital, risk appetite assessment, strategy capital, alongside financial capital as inputs to startups to flower or bloom their ideas?
So I'll try to answer. I don't know if I fully understood the question or not. On valuations first, I know it appears kind of, it has no rhyme or logic or rhythm to how valuations are decided. Valuation is a factor of where we, today with what we know, we think a company's potential is likely to be. that at best is anybody's guessing game. If I gave you even a public company today and said, this is their stock, 5 years down the road, what do you think their stock is going to be? And if you got that exactly right, you would be doing a very different kind of a business. So even in companies that have a lot of history, you can't take 5 years out and be able to guess what this company's valuation is going to be, let alone with a startup where we are starting with an idea. So, but that's exactly what we are trying to do. And of course, every company says, I'm going to be $1 billion business. And we all know that even if you take on a global basis over the last 20 years, or at least if I take over the last 10 years, I think maybe about 24 companies have actually broken the $1 billion mark. This is globally I'm talking about. So it's not like, 500 companies are going to become $1 billion companies. We all know that. So while every entrepreneur believes they are going to be one of those, there is an evaluation on, assigning some probability, which is all you can do. But a rule of thumb would be, in general, a company will dilute 20 to 30% at each round of financing. Doesn't really matter because each investor looks at least making a 3 to 5x return in the next 2 to 3 years, right? So that's sort of a base model, right? So and being that, then you will dilute 20 to 30%. Now the question is, how much money did you get to dilute that? That depends on the sector, that depends on the stage of the company, and that depends on the team and how the investor evaluates the completeness of the team to take this company through its journey. So you could be raising $1 billion like Flipkart. You'll probably still dilute 20% of the company. I'm giving a plus or minus. But ultimately, that's what you should assume. So if you're raising seed stage investment, maybe you're raising $1 million and diluting 20%. You're raising a Series A investment, maybe you're raising $5 million and diluting 20-25%, but that's sort of how I would look at it, which is why the dilution keeps piling the more number of rounds you do and the more investment you raise. And the problem is, after you've raised 4, 5, 6 rounds, you say, well, I'm the one building the business, I don't have a lot of ownership, but the problem is you had to go through different steps and different investors at each stage, and that's why that gets compounded. So maybe we'll take one last question. I don't know how much time we have.
One last question.
Yeah, one last question.
Here, in front. 12 o'clock.
Okay. I can't see you, but I can hear you, so that's fine.
Okay. Hi. Thank you and congratulations for successfully treading the unconventional path, especially for Indian women entrepreneurs. I'm the founder of Raw Dreams. My name is Alisha. And given that you yourself are a result of the non-famous choices that you have made in your life, what role or in what ways do you think we can encourage such an individuality or sense of choice or dreams for youngsters, especially in schools and colleges?
First, you have to influence yourself to the choices and the path that you take. But within that, none of us, whatever our successes may be, can attribute all of that to our own merit, our own choice, our own IQ. I think there are many, many dimensions that play a role to any place that we reach in our life. And, I've always benefited from many, many, many mentors in my life who I think enabled micro choices, which you can look over a decade of history or look back to life and see how those seemingly inconsequential choices really affected final outcomes in your life. I went to a very, how should I say, conventional, conservative, government school, primarily Telugu medium school in Narayanguda called Madapati Hanumantarao Girls School. But I had really access to fantastic teachers who grilled us in, amazingly when I look back, we would have to debate every month. We had to write essays every month. And those are skills that you actually don't even think about as important in your education, but they provided a critical thinking, provided an ability to sort of analyze in choices and, think, so on and so forth. And we had a wonderful math teacher who in high school I absolutely loved, and that put me on a path of mathematics and into hence engineering, which when I went to engineering school in Usmania University right here was very unconventional. I think my year there were 6 girls in our batch, and so that wasn't sort of the done thing, but I loved math and I would ascribe that to one single teacher. And then going on, to do a startup, when I had an idea, this was in Silicon Valley, I went to our CEO, which, again, the Silicon Valley provides this kind of an atmosphere. I said, look, I want to go do this idea. And he said, yeah, quit your job. I mean, that is the company in which I'm working, his own company. And I will mentor you, I'll give you some angel funding. I mean, that's a very unusual thing if you think about. But that's what that atmosphere was all about, right? So, and then, I really could not have pursued the career that I did if my parents at every step were willing to back it up, not just at a younger age of, you study and so on and so forth. But when my children were born, my parents quit everything they were doing here in Hyderabad and were willing to come and help and support. And I share some of these because, they are not very big things. They are small things in your life. But those things, if they didn't exist, we don't know what would be the path of our life. So I think mentors come from many places, and even today, when we asked Mr. Ratan Tata to become an advisor to our firm, it was about saying, how can we learn? It wasn't about a sort of PR, it was for us about someone who has built institutions of trust, which we respect and value. And that seems easy, right? But it's not so easy. It is about, what you do every minute of your life and how do we learn from that. So continue to seek mentors who bring the best out of you. But with all of that, still, there is every day a fork in the road, and you have to decide which fork you are going to take and not keep looking back and not keep looking at a road not taken with regret. But you have to continue to say, tomorrow, what road do I take? There isn't any better advice than that. It's the simple things that we do in life and do them right that ends up mattering the most. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And Kiran, congratulations on a fantastic TheAugustFest that you have created in Hyderabad.
For sharing your valuable entrepreneur journey, starting from Hyderabad to Silicon Valley and back here and being so known in this world of startups. A little token from us. Thank you.
Huge round of applause, guys.